Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of Humans of Caltra, a series showcasing awesome goals people are working on with Caltra. Just in case you didn't know, I'm Jerry. I'm working on Caltra, a tool to help people reach their personal goals. Check it out at caltra.co. Today we have a special guest here, my friend Elton Lin, who's a senior MIT Apple intern, and he's building a tool for collaborative learning. This episode is going to be a little different. We're going to be talking about Elton's goals, but also go more in depth about how we think about goals, theories we have around task management, and how culture fits into all of this. Welcome to the show, Elton.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so do you want to share really briefly about like what are some things that you're working on or what are some goals you have?
Some goals I'm working on. Feynman is the collaboration platform. It's essentially like a knowledge sharing platform that is based on visual explanations like Khan Academy. Other goals: do well in class, study more, getting better at basketball. That one's a big one, man. I'm sick of missing shots and not being to make to do crossovers properly and getting to, having turnovers. So those are my main goals in my life.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you have any metrics you track for basketball for like how well you're doing?
Yeah, so metrics is kind of odd for basketball. I remember there was like this app which is like which uses AI to like analyze like the trajectories of your shots and how many you make. But I think usually the best way is just to have someone who's good at basketball and just ask them for feedback. And if you ask, they'll usually answer, and they'll tell you, oh, maybe your balance is off. There's some shoulder rotations. You don't use your wrist enough. The arc is not high enough, and that's usually much, in my opinion, much better than other things I've tried.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so we're gonna come back and touch on your goals later. We're gonna talk a little bit about goals and task management. So how do you like choose what to work on? How do you set goals in the first place?
Yeah, that's super hard. I think we
Yeah.
touched on this last time we met in Melody. I think that is the jump. That's the hardest step, because once you have a goal, you can instantiate it, you can divide it into sub goals and milestones and things, and it becomes more formulaic. But I think it's through very careful thinking from first principles. It's like, I guess one way of, so this is about the method, not about what you think. It's like to think carefully. I'm going to quote Peterson because I think he's just so relevant in the subject. He says the best way to think is to write, because when you write, you can examine multiple ideas at once, and you can easily see which ideas are good and which ideas are bad. And when you remove the bad ideas, then you're only left with the good ideas, and you can change the way sentences are. Now, so through careful thinking, through writing. Now, what do you think about? Well, I guess one way is to I remember there were two ways. The first way is, if it's too hard to come up with a goal, try a very conventional goal and see how that works out. If you can't think of anything that's creative, go like, okay, maybe do well in school, maybe get a good job, maybe something conventional. And that usually, even if that's not maybe the best goal you set, another like corollary is that we never know enough to set the best global goal that we should be aiming for, but we have incomplete information. The point is to have a goal that's at least has some component in the right direction. And as you strive towards that goal, it'll bring you into new places where you have effectively different vision. And now that allows you to set even better goals, and you keep adjusting, you keep overshooting and correcting. So one way is to just set normal goals. And the second way is, I guess, write or make notes and remember moments where of life where you felt really meaning. You felt your life was filled with meaning, whatever that means. Which, it kind of makes sense. It's like there's some times where it's obviously very rare, but like times where I was working on Feynman, where as I was coding, I literally felt it was an undeniable feeling. I think everybody experiences that doing different things, and just to make special note of when does this occur, what situations allow this to happen, and how can I reproduce it, and what kind of goals can help me get to that state more often and than not. And so yeah, by this point I forgot the question.
No, yeah, I think
that's how you set goals, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective. I haven't heard those approaches before. I think I kind of want to touch on both of the points. The first one is to go through conventional ways, which I think actually makes a lot of sense, because we all know like we should be healthier, we should like work on our fitness, like we should get a good job. But like I think what you said is valuable, that sometimes we don't want to do these things, and it's not like something we are dying to do, but it does move us in a place that like we can make better decisions, and we can have more perspective to create a goal that we actually really want to do on. So I think that's a really good method. And I think for the second point, I think, yeah, like talking about like what you're passionate working on, and like keeping notes of like moments you found that like you really enjoyed, and chasing those moments is definitely a very valid thing for what to do in terms of goals. Kind of cool. Yeah.
I was just saying you say it better than I do.
I'm just reiterating what you said. Cool. So goals, that's like the first step. That's the first hurdle for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I guess like the next step is like, how do you translate goals into tasks? Like, how do you translate goals into things that you can do like right now, or like things you can do this week? Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on how that flow works for you?
So I'm not going to be able to answer the whole thing, but I think one thing is, I think the most important idea with instantiating goals into tasks is from Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Or maybe it's on some different blog posts. And it's also seen in like another book. The point is in order to achieve a goal, set up systems rather than set up systems. Don't be result oriented, be process oriented. Set up habits. So instead of let's say if I had a goal of losing weight until I was like 40 kilograms, that would be pretty atrocious, but instead of measuring my progress by how much weight I lose a week, which is not in my control, because that's a lot of things involved in that, as my body's biochemistry and the food and everything, and that's out of my control. So Mark Manson would say that's a bad way of like setting tasks. It's like, okay, every week I'm going to lose 2 pounds. Like that's a very bad task. A good task would be every week I run for 2 miles. That you can always do. That's always fully within your control. And of course, the idea is that when you set up a habit, eventually the goal will converge, and like it just becomes an inevitable path. Now, so I guess what I kind of talked about was like the merits of setting up systems rather than goals, not just for the sake of motivation. That's the first thing, because if you're measuring by results out of your control, then it's very easy to be demotivated and never get into the compounding phase of the rewards of having good habits. And I guess the second thing is that having repeating tasks that are habits, that's essentially what habits are. They outsource your computation, like what you have to think about. You know, like the extreme example is always like if you have a really dumb person who doesn't know how to think. If he just follows what a smart person tells him to do, he'll do really well. Life is hard because not only do you have to decide what's the right thing to do, you then have to do them. But if you can really like predetermine, like, hey, if I do these every two times a week, and that would be the right thing to do, no matter what situation, what week it is. That's really powerful. That means you can now think about other things. Thinking is a very limited resource, right? And it's so amazing that you can wake up on a Monday and you can go, okay, I have class at 9. How do you even know that? You never send a message like doodle like to professors and students going, hey, like what's everyone's availability? No, it's just like, it's so simple. When it's things that are discovered to be repeatable is pretty much problems. I guess this is what I want to say. Like when you can, a goal positively seen as a goal, it's like a chasing a dream. A goal negatively defined is like a problem. Like you have to do this in order to do the thing. Okay, so, and when you find like the predictable recurring problem within that overall goal, that the grand problem, then you can do predictable things to solve those problems. And predictable problems, if they're not unsolvable, basically don't exist, right? Like meals, we know we get hungry every day. So it's predictable. And so we don't even think about it every day because it's predictable goals, the problems that are solvable don't exist. So I think, yeah, I went off track again. The best way to instantiate goals into tasks is to identify repeatable units.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I've thought a lot about repeating tasks because Caltra is going to sneak in here that like repeating tasks is a huge part in Caltra. I think like one of the largest differences between like goals people have and like personal goals people have versus like business goals people are working on is that in personal goals you have these like problems that like you can do recurring tasks and like you can do repeating tasks to make progress on them. Whereas in like business problems and business goals, every single task has to be unique. Every single task you do is different from each other. And you can't find these cycles where you can like create these opportunities for this repeat to happen. So yeah, I think that's a big part of personal goals, and that's something unique to goals in general. And I think what you said about like creating systems in order to get to goals makes a lot of sense. And I've also read, I don't think I read the books that you did, but also have read that other places where it's better to be focused on building systems and keeping systems rather than just like constantly mulling over the results. But yeah, I feel like other people have told me about repeating tasks, and kind of like what you said, if it saves you time and like you have to think about what you have to do. Having that repeatability kind of makes a tool like Caltra a meta to-do list, where it's like every week it'll generate you a to-do list to do for that week. Whereas for other tools like for to-do list or like tasks list, you have to manually add in like, oh, I want to run, I want to like eat a meal. Like if you're able to have these repeating cycles built in, the to-do list generates itself. And that is something that like can only be done with repeating tasks and personal goals. So I think it's super important. Cool. So that's about like creating tasks. Now we get to the fun part where we create our goals, we create our tasks. We have to actually do them. We have to actually like manage them. Do you have any thoughts on like how to like organize or manage a ton of work, or like ways to tackle them and actually do them? Because that's what we're working towards at the end of the day.
I think, so how do you actually do them at the end of the day? Now you know what to do. This is actually a recent realization. I don't know why, like it sounds so obvious. I put special events in your calendar, but as the day goes, try to translate as many of the tasks on Caltra and fit them onto the calendar, because it's the only way for you to know if doing all the tasks are actually feasibly possible within the time you have. There's no way from looking at the list of tasks that you know whether you can actually do them all unless you do a lot of mental computations. That's the first thing. Like when you instantiate them into a time and a location, but not just that, you have to see them with respect to all the other things you have to do, and the calendar does exactly that. I guess the second thing is kind of what I find is if there are like 4 goals so I have like 5 goals on Caltra. There's too many tasks. Like I don't think I can do them all in one day. And so that kind of becomes like kind of overwhelming. But the thing is I use the filter thing. So I go like, okay, what are the top 2 most important things, 2 important goals that I should work on? Okay, that differs. So there's some things that there's a sidetrack, but there's some things that should be done every day. So there's certain goals that require you to work on it every day. So I'm not talking about those. I think those you should incorporate that into your daily habit. I'm talking about like some other goals, like running a marathon. Maybe you don't run every single day. Okay, that's a bad example, but I think filter the goals, know what you want, and that now you have a more manageable list of things to do. Fit them on the calendar, and it's already a good way to go, right? Now, what remains is just like the motivation, and I think I think the only idea which has survived through my own testing is that be very willing to do things badly. Meditate for like a minute. It's useless. It doesn't actually have any benefits, except you have now primed your mind to think about it during the day, right? Like, so like, let's say you do meditation for 1 minute a day. After 2 months, you will have no benefits. But the thing is, at least you will start thinking about it. It becomes part of your thought patterns. And when it becomes part of your thought patterns, you're just much more likely to do it. A lot of things we don't do is just because it never occurred in our mind. We don't even think about it. And so, and then another thing is just like doing something badly is usually 2 magnitudes better than not doing anything. And then doing something well is like maybe like 5 times better than doing something badly, but that's still within a magnitude. So, instead of going, oh, I don't want to run 10 miles, just even running 2 miles is fine. That's so much better. Like going to yoga and like being super lazy and not even like trying to do things properly is still way better than not doing yoga at all during that day. So take it very easy on yourself and and just do things badly.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I want to touch on some points you talk about. Calendar integration coming soon for Caltra. That's in the works. That's in the plans. And then I really resonate with what you said about doing work badly is 2 times magnitude better than not doing any work at all. And like, I think this is also something special in personal goals where a lot of times it's like, you just need to work on or the best way that I've talked to people is like people just need to work on their goals. They need to like allocate time for their goals. And yeah, they don't have to do it. Like when you're running, you don't have to run the like best distance. You don't have to run it in the best time, but just like building into your routine, just like doing it and like taking those baby steps to get there will like make you better and better. And it'll make things easier for you. And then that's kind of like the motivation inside of Caltra for how to like help people work around their goals. A lot of it is focused on helping people get like some amount of work done. So for example, like if you create goals, there's like I don't know if you've noticed, there's like a default task button when you're assigning tasks to goals. And the default task is just like spend an hour working on your goal. And like a lot of times that helps. And a lot of times just like allocating that hour is better. And you might not know exactly what to do. You might not know if this is the best thing to do, but just like spending time and working on something will help you like reach your goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's something that like not only running, but also like building up skills, like so many different things. It's just like even meditation, as you said, or building routines and building habits. It's just getting started is the hardest step. And yeah, I think people worry too much about like, oh, is this the optimal thing I'm doing? Is what I'm doing the best way to go about it? Like am the exercises I'm doing in the gym the best exercise to do? But it's like the fact that you're doing exercises at all is like really fantastic, and it's like you're getting healthier and you're feeling better because of it. So I definitely agree in terms of that aspect.
I also wanted to add, like
Yeah.
you said, the default task is spend 1 hour on the task, and that's really good because you can always spend 1 hour on a task. That's process oriented. You can spend 1 hour whether you achieve anything on it. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Spend an hour.
Yeah, and the point is like, even though after an hour you spend on something, you might not feel like you're moving towards your goal, but like when you move it to the completed column and then that like little bar goes up from like 5 out of 7 tasks done this week to like 6 out of 7 tasks, and you get the reward in your like weekly report of like, oh, you spent like 7 hours on this. Like that's where the feel good comes in, and that's the idea for like a third party platform like Cultra to help you out and like help you feel better when you're working through these times where you're just spending an hour working on something, which is valuable, but you don't see it immediately. Yeah, so cool that we talked a lot. So going from like setting goals to setting tasks to doing tasks. So we talked super abstractly, and I know from our previous conversations, you had like systems set up for each one of these steps. Do you want to talk about like your stack that you've worked with, or like what have you tried, or what works, and like how does Cultra fit into that stack?
I think we'll be here all day if I was to talk about all the things I've tried in the past. So I'll focus on what I do now.
Sure, go for it.
I think so. It's very much centered on this idea of identify as many recurring problems as you can, because recurring problems are basically solved. And the thing is, I think there are two types of repeating problems. For example, when I brush my teeth, while some people might use Caltra for that because that could be like the goal of being healthy, I like to categorize tasks as defensive and offensive. Defensive tasks are tasks which, when you complete them, nothing changes. But if you don't do them, you might get very big setbacks or a disaster. And so if you do only defensive tasks, you won't get anywhere in life, but you'll be safe. So the optimal life is like you always finish your defensive task and then you do some offensive tasks. I think a good way to capture that is like through the analogy of sport. Like if you think about maybe let's say basketball. Let's say you have like the most amazing. You have Steph Curry on your team and he keeps shooting 3-pointers, right? But your defense sucks. So you have no defense, right? So what's gonna happen? Steph Curry makes the most incredible 3-pointer, but the other team will just keep scoring constantly. So like your actual lead is not increasing. You're just like the progress you gain is being overshadowed by the lack of defense. So their defense and offensive tasks. I like to track defensive tasks on this app called Habitica, which is very similar. It's a gamified task manager. And you can set up like daily recurring tasks. So I put like brushing my teeth, putting in my contact lenses at night and taking them out in the morning. I wear one of those ones. Doing push-ups. I even write little things like eating breakfast on there because I think it's not super clear to me what tasks you should put. The thing is like I'll just put any defensive task and try to like I think to understand what actually happens in the day, you have to just actually write down everything you do. And then eventually you just ignore it. So Habitica, I barely open Habitica. But the only reason I don't have to open it is because I already set it up and now I remember like everything I have to do in the day. And so there's like meditation. There's like things like that. I don't think meditating will like get me to any goals. So that's why it stays in Habitica.
No, I think I want a quick interruption. Like I think Habitica is really awesome. I checked it out and it basically gamifies all your tasks, and it's basically an RPG. So a game is probably like the maximum amount of artificial reward you can get from working on something. more than any numbers or stats, which is why I think Habitica is really awesome. But I think what you talked about for defensive tasks works really well for Habitica.
Yeah, for the I don't even really use a gamified thing. It was the initial attraction.
Yeah.
I think me using it just like I just needed a different app that handles defensive tasks. I don't think they led to any goals, so it could have been anything. I don't. With offensive tasks, then culture, right? And it's like, okay, I know I have to do all the defensive tasks. I guess I made a theory that you must do all the defensive tasks, all of them. And so like if you could choose like a sequence, if you had to choose a sequence in which you do things, you always do the defensive tasks first. And then, okay, now I'm done with that. Cultra, and I look at the top goals. And what was the question again?
Like what systems do you use?
So what's a stack? Yeah, so I'll look at what I have to do, choose the goals that I think are the most important, and fit them on my calendar. And so I guess if it's a top-down workflow, it's like Cultra and Habitica are like side by side. They're at the same level. They just deal with different tasks. But then ultimately, for me to do something, it goes one level down. It gets instantiated onto the calendar. And once everything is on the calendar, I can remove it from. I can say, oh, it's done on Cultra. Tick it off. Oh, I guess there's one more thing. There's Trello. I also use Trello. And Trello is more for like one-off tasks. It's more like one-off defensive tasks. Habitica takes care of all the repeating defensive tasks. And so it's like errands, like I have to get my new passport, right? I wouldn't put that on Cultra. I wouldn't put it on Habitica because I don't get a passport every day. So I put things, so that's like the loading dock. So Habitica, Cultra, Trello, and then make a decision, schedule them on the calendar. That's the final thing, and I do them. Now, what's one level up? It's what I guess mentioned earlier. I think the only way is to write and think, like spend 20 minutes thinking really carefully about, like I try to spend 20 minutes just thinking very carefully about my life and what I want to get done with the day. And it's difficult, but it's like you write it out and then you think it out very carefully, and usually you'll be able to come to arrive at some conclusions, and that this is thinking. So you're thinking. So I guess OneNote captures like my thinking process, and you can do some very self-inquisitive things there, and that's what leads you to determining what goals you have. And then once you have goals, you're just letting the rest of the stack do the work.
Yeah, I want to drop a quick note about writing. I think writing is really valuable for like a lot of, this isn't a feature built into Cultra, but a lot of goals I've worked on, like that I really care about, like I would like write an essay about it before I actually do them. Because I think writing is unique because it forces you to face your own thoughts. So everyone thinks, everyone has opinions about different things. And it all makes sense in our head, or to some degree. But like when you put it on a piece of paper, when you type it all out, write it all out, and you have to read it, then you're like, whoa there, like this doesn't make sense. Like I don't really want to do this. And like that helps you clarify a lot of your thinking in terms of like what you want to do or what you really believe in. So I think writing is really valuable for that. But go on, give your summary of your stack, because I think your stack is probably one of the most unique processes.
That's bad. I thought. Okay.
The most like full stack type of thing I've heard from people.
Yeah, highest level, the thinking level, my brain and observations. You know, like moments in your life that's meaningful. Like the clues, everything you see, and OneNote, and then OneNote. With your writing, and then that gets the output of OneNote is goals, and then so the goals determine the things in Cultra, and then but you still need Trello and Habitica because they're just defensive tasks, whether or not you have goals. So that's just to handle non-goal tasks, and then so Cultra and Habitica and Trello, and then the calendar. It's like it goes.
Yeah. Maybe I'll make a graphic and put it in a video. Cool. So yeah, I think you have a really interesting, like, unique process for working on. I guess like I want to push a little more on like in terms of like offensive goals as to how you describe them.
Mhm.
Like I think for most people I know the problem is like they work on defensive tasks all the time, as what you would put it. Like of course like they eat breakfast, like brush your teeth, and then but how they organize their day is in terms of like the work they want to do, they just like do all the defensive tasks and that's like their entire day.
Mhm.
So like how do you find time, like windows in your schedule? Like how do you make time to work on their goals? Like that's like a huge challenge for a lot of people.
I think I'm the worst person to talk about this because I'm a person who neglects defensive tasks to do offensive tasks.
Same.
Yeah, so you'll be in the same boat, right?
Uh-huh.
When I was working on Feynman, I skipped all my lectures and to work on it, and that was a really, really bad move because the marginal value of like having one more hour to spend coding is way worse than the marginal value of hey, just sacrifice 1 hour to go to a lecture and learn the things. Like it's a really bad strategy, but that's my natural inclination. So I don't have a problem with finding time to do offensive tasks. My problem is finding time to actually do defensive tasks because I think they just don't. There's such a pain, honestly. And you do you want to hear my solution for like doing defensive tasks?
Sure.
I think there's only well, no, that's not culture though. But
It's fine.
it's multitasking and habit pairing. I think that's the only way to do things. So like listen to music while you tidy your room, listen to a podcast while you do laundry. Uh, if
Yeah,
you
no, that's
if you
good
find
strategy.
yourself watching Netflix instead of going to bed, go like, okay, I can only watch Netflix when I brush my teeth. And then so now you're like, oh, I'm done. Okay, I'll go to sleep. So like that's habit pairing. Pairing something you definitely do that's a bad
Very
habit,
interesting.
something that you have to do.
Very cool. Oh, like defense task versus offense task. I think it's just like it's very hard. I think at the end of the day, everyone struggles with managing tasks, and I think the reason why your inclination is towards offensive tasks is because you're so passionate about Feynman and you're so passionate about like the problems you're solving that like that's why you're naturally drawn towards it. So I think like that's I guess like that's your way of like fitting those into your schedule. Cool. I think we'll talk a little about Feynman because they've been like hopping around it and like jumping around it. So Feynman's like a collaborative tool, like a collaborative whiteboard, right, for people to work out of. Like kind of what was like the inspiration, or like well how did you get so interested in working on it?
Uh, so let's see. I I am a little stubborn in that I think if MIT taught me differently, I could have learned things much faster. Uh, one evidence of this was in 1802, I was taking this calculus class. This is something freshmen take. They had a blunder, man. They found out that all the PSET questions they set had their solutions online. And what the professor did is like, it's okay, you guys can use the solutions. At that point, it was really too like he didn't have anything to solve it. So he says, just as long as you say that you use the solutions, uh, we'll mock the PSETs. And ultimately, the midterms weigh much more. So if you really understand the material, you'll do well, right? And so what do I do for my PSETs? Well, I use the solutions. And what I would do is like, I look at solutions and it'll all make sense. And I'll try to do them myself. And it wouldn't make sense, right? I'll get stuck. And that's when I know that insight was the gap in my knowledge. And that's the way I learned. And I learned very quickly. PSETs took like 2 hours, right?
Pieces are problem sets, right?
Problem sets,
Yeah.
yes. And that was the only math class I've ever gotten an A in. I got like highest averages in the final exam. I felt good about myself. But for other classes, there was a real lack of material. I really struggled, and I just didn't like. Hey, Franz. um, I didn't like the fact that for PSETs, they would purposely deny us of information to make the problems hard to solve. I think that's yeah, I mean, that's exactly what they're doing, right? Like they're making information private. Only people in the class can access it. You can't access materials from previous years. Things to make things difficult, so you learn how to do independent studying.
I think they want you to wrestle with the problems because you'll gain insight doing so. I think that's the hypothesis.
Yes. So yeah, I actually came around to this idea more, and my view is a bit more balanced now. It had to be in order, but anyway. So with Feynman, it's just like it's the inspiration, which is very simple. It's that I wish there was more content available for people to study, and I wished that people helped each other more. And like I think it didn't make sense that, you know, if the sophomores finished taking a really difficult class, I find it strange that no material is there's no communication between the sophomores and the freshmen. So now the freshmen take the class, so the next generation of students take the same class. They're not going to get any benefits from the previous generation. Like there's no passing down of knowledge. There's no sharing of knowledge. And I think so that was the problem that inspired me to create the platform.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. To like summarize what you said, it's kind of like you want to democratize access to information about like education, about classes. And the way to do so is by building infrastructure to facilitate that. Is that correct? Like, so yeah, like you're giving people the tools to do this.
Initially, I thought it's the infrastructure. So I thought, you know, I'll just make a platform where people can share their explanations, and that'll be enough. It turned out not to be enough, because it turned out people were very busy, and in order to make content,
it's hard.
That's hard. That's benefits other people, takes time, and a lot of people don't do that. But what I did notice, that's not the same statement as saying people don't want to help each other. I guess the single insight that Feynman is built on is the fact that people will, I would have never said all these things about goals and tasks and everything if I was just alone in my room. You know, Jerry, if you just told me to like write an essay or like do a monologue on these things, I'm like, hell no, I don't have the motivation or the things like that. There's something strange about the fact when somebody asks you questions that makes you really want to just because thinking is so, and so I realized that's exactly what the problem is. Making videos is like you telling me to do a monologue. Asking you to do an explanation is like an interview. And people then say all sorts of things that they wouldn't have said on their own device. And so what if there's a way for people to explain concepts to each other on this platform? And now that this mechanism is established, find a way to leverage those explanations and save them as visual explanations. And then a corollary was that, what's the best way for people to explain things to each other on the internet? Well, it's not really through text, because typing is slow. It's not really just through talking, because there's no visuals. The best way is to do it as you do in real life, on a whiteboard whilst talking. There's both the drawing and the talking at the same time. That's the maximum information transfer you can possibly achieve. And it's also really easy for the person giving the explanation. And the corollary, and the nice, not corollary, I misuse that word. Mathematicians are going to hate me. But the thing is, the good thing about that is it's also good for the viewers, because we always say videos are better than images, and images are better than text. But the thing is, videos take a month to make a 5-minute video. We don't make images. I don't think any of us actually are to make images. They take too long to make, but I've somehow thought, hey, maybe there is a way such that you can make videos, and you can make videos faster than you can even type, or like, and somehow making videos will be the fastest way and the most enjoyable way of sharing knowledge. And I think, and that's the essence of Feynman. It's content creation as a byproduct of just collaboration of people doing what they already do. I mean, today, Khan Academy, 100% of their content is from full-time content creators whose jobs is to create videos. And that's a shame, because think of the Carnegie Mellon professors, or the TAs, or the students who are really smart. They can't participate in this knowledge sharing just by virtue of the fact that there's so much time would be needed. So with Feynman, if this works, we can tap into the minds of so many people who are really qualified to share something valuable with the world, and not only share it as like a Quora answer or like a Stack Overflow answer, but as very vivid, visual, process-oriented explanations. And I think that's what excites me the most, I guess.
Yeah, I think, no, that's super interesting. I think something clicked for me when you brought up Stack Overflow and Quora, because these conversations are already happening. Like these explanations are already happening over text. These questions are all being asked, and like, yeah, like reading a Quora answer, it's very hard to digest like an essay. But having something drawn out, having something visual would definitely like be a better medium of knowledge transfer. So I think that would be really cool.
I also wanted to just add, like, I forgot that Feynman is essentially just Google Hangouts with a digital whiteboard.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's all the stuff I have. Do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you for letting me eat. I was really hungry. I was thinking, should I eat or not? And there were pros and cons. I think the deciding issue reasoning that made is that if I eat, I'll think better and I'll get better.
No, that's awesome. You gave great answers. I think it's really interesting to talk about like breaking down the goals into theory, right? I don't think that anyone or there's no resource for anyone to read this type of stuff. Yeah. So I think it's really cool. Thanks for coming on and spending time.
Yeah, thank you for interviewing me. I really
Yeah, and I'll put like your links that you want to share for Feynman and wherever to find you down below. And yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much again.
Cool.